Hal Elrod, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be back, man.
It's good to have you back. There's something about you and what you've gone through that I find incredibly useful. This might be the wrong word, but you have faced death legitimately twice. Your heart actually stopped, I think, for 6 minutes after a car accident.
Yeah.
And then not too long ago, you were diagnosed with cancer. They gave you 10 to 20% chance of survival.
20 to 30, but still not good.
Yeah. Not on the right side of that 50% mark.
No.
But you have put together ways of dealing with it. Before we get to the stuff that you cover in your miracle equation, I want to know what it's like when somebody tells you that you have potentially fatal cancer. Like, what's that moment? Especially when you've been through something like that before.
Yeah, there's obviously multiple thoughts and feelings, but for me, the car accident when I was 20, it gave me a lot of faith in the power of self-healing, in the power of faith itself, right? And so the day I was diagnosed with cancer.
So faith.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. But you use miracle, faith, like these are very specific words.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll come back to that. So sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So we kind of talked about this on the last time I was here in terms of one of the greatest lessons I learned was when I was 20 years old, actually 19 years old. I learned the lesson to accept reality exactly as it is. And the other side of that coin is that every painful emotion that we experience is self-created by our resistance to our reality.
Do people push back on you when you say that? Because you go hard in the new book. You go hard with the idea that whatever negative emotion you're experiencing, that's entirely on you. You create that. You can stop that. I've gotten pushback on ideas like that. In fact, the strongest pushback I've ever gotten on any idea I've ever presented to the world was that it's all your fault. Now, maybe that fault is the word that freaks people out.
To me, this is the difference, is that the difference between responsibility and blame, right? People confuse those two. Like I say, you're responsible for your life. And they go, well, how can I be responsible I wasn't responsible for the trauma and the tragedy and the this, the that. Like I wasn't responsible for my car accident, right? But the difference between responsibility and blame is blame determines who's at fault, right? The drunk driver was at fault. Maybe your parent was at fault for wronging you or abusing you when you were a child. Responsibility determines who's committed to the current reality and the future reality, right? So it's like, I'm not at fault for blank, but I'm responsible for how I experience every moment of my life. And that's actually the future of my work, I feel, is really focusing on teaching people how to choose their optimal experience in every moment of life, regardless of what's going on outside of you.
Do people get confused? And we will get back to that moment where you're told that you have terminal cancer. But so the idea of choosing your experience, define experience for me, because the thing that's happening to you is not necessarily the thing that you can choose. I agree with you that we have agency, but I never would have used the word experience.
In your inner experience,
okay,
right? So what you think, how you feel, what you focus on, your mindset, et cetera, right? You get to choose your experience. And a great example or great is the Viktor Frankl, right? He said the last of man's freedom is to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances.
This is a guy in a concentration camp.
In a concentration
camp.
For
people that don't know.
Yeah, which, and I always think, like, I love his book and his story because it's like, we've all got issues, we've all faced adversity. It doesn't get much worse than waiting for your day to die. Having he was 31 years old, wife's at home, kids at home. He's watching his friends and peers being taken to the gas chamber and thinking he's going to die. And you realize, oh, I get to choose my experience. Like, that's how I would define it. To me, that's choosing my experience. I can't change what's happening outside of me. I can't change what happened 5 minutes ago, 5 months ago, 5 decades ago. But I can choose how I experience every moment of my life. And for me, I want to experience love in every moment. I want to experience gratitude in every moment. And and this will circle back to your question. The day that I was diagnosed with cancer, I told my wife, I said, sweetheart, I will be the happiest, most grateful version of myself that I've ever been while I endure what I imagine will be the most difficult time in my life.
How does your wife respond in that moment? So let me set the stage here. So I'm guessing that in the exact moment that you get diagnosed, that you don't have this sort of, because right now you sound like a teacher, right?
Yeah.
And I'm guessing in that moment, it was more like, I just got hit with a sledgehammer. And there's like a disorienting effect to all of that. Did you have that reaction, or have you done so much work that you don't even have that reaction? This is like a monk-like existence.
That. And I say that humbly. Here's what I mean. So when I had my car accident, everything we're talking about in terms of this mindset of accepting reality as it is, accepting the things you can't change so you can be at peace with it, that was developed when I was 19 in my Cutco sales training. I learned something called the 5-minute rule. It says it's okay to be negative when something goes wrong, but not for more than 5 minutes. And the number's arbitrary, to 5 hours, 50 minutes, whatever, right? The point is, painful emotion, you're self-creating your emotional pain based on your resistance to reality, which another way of saying that is it's your wishing and wanting you could change something that's out of your control. And if it already happened, it's out of your control. And so I learned that in a very, the context of facing rejection and failure in a sales career. But when I came out of my coma and I was told I would never walk again, and I had to process that, and that was more what you're talking about, I'm 20 years old, I'm going, wait, what? I'm never going to walk again? I have 11 broken bones. I have permanent brain damage. My ear was almost completely severed. I'm scarred beyond belief. So that was a lot of processing. But I realized, this is that 5-minute rule. It's just in a much more extreme circumstance. I can't change that I was hit by a drunk driver. And if I'm in a wheelchair the rest of my life and I can never walk again, that's my reality. Who will I choose to be in that wheelchair?
Okay, so now we have to talk about reality. So if the experts are telling you that you're going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, you had to decide that you weren't going to let them define your reality. And this is where this gets in. I literally, as you were saying, resistance to reality, I underlined the word reality because that word is tricky. And I'm the same. So I think about the mind being a prediction engine, and that I think of it as the closer you get to what is objectively true, the more you're able to predict the outcome of your actions. But in that, I'm making a lot of assumptions. I'm choosing to believe one thing over another. When I don't have enough evidence in one direction or another, I choose the things I consider to be useful. I won't spend our time defining that, but I have a way that I come up with what is useful. How do you decide what is real?
So to me, here's the two sides of this coin, right? So the doctors thought I was in denial because I was, all positive and happy. And they called my parents in one day and they said, we're concerned with Hal. We believe he's in denial. He's not facing, this is 2 weeks after the crash, 1 week after I came out of the coma. They said, we believe he's not facing reality, essentially, and that it's so painful for him. They said, this is a normal response we see with accident victims that are in some horrific accident, told they're never going to walk again.
Yep.
We believe that he can't handle his reality, so he's checked out, and that's why he's always laughing and joking and, whatever. So my dad came into the hospital room and expressed the doctor's concern, and he said, the doctor said, Hal, what's normal is for you to feel sad or scared or depressed or angry with the drunk driver, angry that this happened. It's normal to feel those emotions. How are you really feeling? And I went inside, and my dad his face is red. He's trying not to cry. He's, and I'm I can tell it's,
he's worried about your future?
He's just, I think that he was, I think it just, he's watching his son, right? It's only 2 weeks removed from me being found dead, and I'm out of the coma for a week. And so it's this very uncertain, as a dad now, I can only imagine, what I went through to me, and compared to what my parents went through, I think my parents had the worst of it, right? And I think until you're a parent, you don't make that connection. But I'm to watch your child go through that and not be able to do anything, And I said, Dad, I said, I thought you knew me better than that. And I said, remember I lived my life by the 5-minute rule that I learned in my Cutco training? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, it's okay to be negative and feel sorry for yourself, but only to a point where you extract the lesson, the value from the circumstance or the experience. And I said, I can't change that I was in a car accident. I can't change that I broke 11 bones. And if the doctors are right and I never walk again, then I'll be in a wheelchair the rest of my life. So I get to choose, though, how I experience every moment on that journey. And I said, and Dad, I've decided, and this came before the cancer, it was the first time I decided, I'll be the happiest, most grateful person you've ever seen in a wheelchair, if that's the case, but I'm not accepting that as my fate. This is the other side of the coin, Tom, is I'm accepting reality exactly as it is, no matter what that is. So if it's essentially, I'm accepting life before it even happens. So if I'm in a wheelchair the rest of my life, I've already accepted that and decided if that's my quote unquote worst case scenario, I'll be at peace in that wheelchair. Because here's the thing, I'm in a wheelchair either way at that point. I'm either miserable in a wheelchair or I'm the happiest person you've ever met in a wheelchair. Either way, I'm in a wheelchair. And if anybody's watching, I often ask, like, what's your wheelchair? Like, what's the circumstance in your past or present that's out of your control? And you're allowing it, it's giving you, you're allowing it and giving yourself permission that, well, I feel bad because this happened in my past. I'm a victim because this is happening in my current reality. Versus, I can't change what I can't change, but I get to choose how I experience what I can't change.
How do you walk, though, the path of, okay, I might end up in a wheelchair, and if I am, I'm going to be the happiest ever, but in the interim, I'm going to fight really hard.
Yes.
And, by the way, go through a tremendous amount of suffering, I have to imagine, in rehabilitating yourself and all of that. So it would have been easier to truly not resist what the doctors are telling you is real, because there's going to be less physical pain, certainly, in just acquiescing to, well, I'm going to be in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
It's going to be much harder to stay optimistic, to push against that, to do the physical therapy and all of that stuff. So what I'm trying to wrap my head around is how you both accept, I accept the future outcome and whatever may be, but there's some, and this is where reconciling how sort of hardcore scientific push I can change and faith, miracle, which to me, in the way that I define those words, is like utterly detached from all that stuff.
Woo-woo.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yes.
Totally. Yeah. This is the other side of the coin that I keep missing to get to. So here's where it's at. I accept my life exactly as it is, and I accept no matter what happens in my future, I accept life before it happens.
Yep.
While I'm going to maintain unwavering faith that I can create the outcome I want until proven otherwise. So the beauty of it is...
What do you call proof?
That I get to a point where, well, it's been X amount of time and I can't walk again.
How do you decide that amount of time? So, for instance, I know somebody that had a stroke and they're just not, years and years and years now, and they're not recovering at the rate to the extent that they hoped they would, and they are beginning to wonder, is this a futile approach, or do I keep going?
So, yeah, it's this, to me, you can get to this place, it's almost like, I guess, in some ways, an enlightened state, where you accept life exactly as it is, as I've just said, while you move toward what you want. And I'll give you, here's how this worked out with the car accident. And I told my dad in this conversation, I said, Dad, I accept that I may never walk again. I'm at peace with that. But I'm not deciding that's my only option. I said, the doctors might be experts in medicine, but they're not experts in me. And I really believe that, right? Like, just because you're given a statistic, that's the statistic based on the masses. Based on people that live in fear, based on people that eat unhealthy, based on people that aren't doing any of the things to heal themselves. And so I told my dad, I said, I'm going to pray every day, I'm going to meditate every day, I'm going on healing, I'm going to visualize myself walking again. I'm going to do everything within my power to create the outcome that I want. And if I get to a point where it's like, no, I can't walk again, and I don't know that time frame, right? For me, it essentially didn't fully come, because a week after that conversation with my dad, and the doctors had said, your son's not going to walk again. He needs to come to grips with that. I think he's delusional. He's checked out. A week later, the doctors came in with routine x-rays, and they said, we don't know how to explain. I don't know if they said, I don't remember the exact words they said, but they said, Hal, we're going to let you take your first step tomorrow. And I was like, I was thinking a year, that in a year I could heal and walk again. But it was 3 weeks after the crash, after my femur broke in half and my pelvis broke in 3 places, that the doctor said, you can walk again. I took my first step the next day. And, I had no science. I wasn't reading, well, what's the mind-body connection and how does epigenetics play into this? And I didn't know, right? It was very layman's approach to healing myself. But now there is a lot of science out there that shows the mind-body connection.
Let me ask you a really pointed question.
Yeah.
Do you think you would have healed faster, the same, or slower if you knew exactly the epigenetic, scientific route to walk? Or is prayer faith, visualization, all of that, more effective. So let me even refine this a little bit further. Assuming that prayer, visualization, all that has a grounded, real world scientific mechanism by which it works, right? So if those things trigger something over here, do you think that if you could just pull the epigenetic levers, that you would get the same outcome? Or is there, I mean, I guess what I'm really asking, is there a deity that's playing some role in faith, miracles, prayer?
That's interesting, right? And we could spend a lot of time talking about, like, I have a very unique relationship with prayer or with God. It's very much, I don't know how it works, right? I don't, for me, it's not like, well, what's written in this or that is exactly how it is. I actually don't know that. I don't have, my faith isn't, it's really not an unwavering faith in what someone else told me is true. It's an unwavering faith in possibility. That's it. And from that
place... Does that mean that there is no fate? When you say possibility, what do you mean?
I think we create, I think we create our fate. I think that great example. If I would have lived in fear, and I would have thought, and I would have given up and gone, oh, I'm never going to walk again. I would imagine there's a strong possibility that would have been the fate I would have created, and I never would have walked again, right? It was no, I'm going to walk again. And I think anecdotal evidence is one of the most underrated, right? Like when it's dismissed, like, oh, no, that's just those 150 people that did that, but we don't have science yet that proves what they did, so it's dismiss that. Dr. Bernie Siegel, who I had on my podcast a couple years ago, he wrote the book Love, Medicine, and Miracles. There's that word again. And Dr. Bernie Siegel, I read his book when I had cancer. And he said that, and this is all anecdotal, but he has, I think, 3,000 patients. And he said that for the most part in his 30-year career, all of the patients that beat cancer, and many of which he said beat cancers they shouldn't have statistically beaten, that were very deadly, they were stage 4. He said those that beat their cancer, they had the mindset, call it unwavering faith, call it unshakable belief, like it's just words, whatever you want to call it. But they went, no, I'm going to live. I'm going to live for my family, for my kids, for my whatever. I'm going to beat this cancer. There's no other option for me. And he said, and he would even be astounded that somehow they did. And he said he watched many cancer patients die that had cancers that they should have beaten, that were very healable. But their mindset was, this is it. I'm going to die. I have cancer. And they lived in fear. And it was this, he said it was self-fulfilling prophecies on both sides.
Okay, let's tie this back to Viktor Frankl for a second. So Viktor Frankl says in Man's Search for Meaning that you could, again, this is in a concentration camp, you could predict within 72 hours who would die, because he said once they gave up, he was like, they only had 72 hours to live. I remember thinking, whoa, that is really interesting. Now, if he's right, and that just feels intuitively correct to me, that there is going to be a biological connection between the parts of your subconscious that reach your conscious mind and vice versa. So your conscious mind, you can't go, I mean, maybe some monks can, but for most people, you can't go slow my heart rate down to exactly 42 beats per minute. You can't go killer T cells up ramp, production to whatever. But truly, when somebody's spirit breaks, there's going to be a biological knock-on effect.
Sure.
Now, for me to go back and answer the question that I was asking you, I agree with you. I don't understand how the universe works. So let me just plant that flag aggressively.
Yeah.
There's something I don't understand very clearly.
Yeah.
So everything that I say becomes a guess. But I have a guess that if I could directly control the epigenome, if I could directly control my biology, that I would get a superior outcome than if I put things in the faith modality, prayer, all of that. Now, that's all I have right now.
Yeah.
So if I were diagnosed with cancer, I would first of all call you and be like, walk me through the exact protocol, because you have like all these anti-cancer visualizations and all that. Dude, I wouldn't be above a single bit of it. I would do it all. I would pray. I would do whatever the hell I needed to do. But that to me is a proxy only for that which we don't understand yet. And so what I want to know, and maybe you've already answered it, but what I want to know is, do you have a hunch? I know you don't know, but do you have a hunch that there is a more powerful spiritual being thing that like is waiting for us to show our faith? Or is this just the lever that we have now because we don't know the scientific levers to pull?
To me, I would say and this might be controversial for some people, but my belief in a higher power, a deity, a spiritual God, it's almost more scientific.
Does that mean that ultimately you will be able to understand in the sort of Einsteinian way of, he didn't think of God, if I understand it correctly, he didn't think of God as a person in the sky, but he very much thought that there is this higher power, whatever, that we don't understand, that put all these rules into play. But once you understand the rules, you really do, in his vernacular, understand God's thoughts.
Yeah. Well, one way, and again, I can't go deep into this statement, but right there,